All right. All right. Well, good evening again. We thank each of you for joining us tonight. We are officially streaming live across our various social media platforms. Again, welcome tonight to Black Mental Health Matters, what we're calling the conversation. Black Mental Health Matters, the conversation. Obviously, this is a conversation that is facilitated by the Pearline Foundation for Educational and Societal Empowerment. I am Darian Hill. I am the co-founder and the chief operations officer for the Pearline Foundation, along with my sister who is on the line tonight, Raquel Brown. She is also co-founder, but she's also our chief executive officer, again, for our foundation. And just to give you just a little background into who we are, our foundation was established back in 2013, and it was a way for us to pay homage to our grandmother, our dearly departed grandmother, maternal grandmother, who passed away back in 2012. And we wanted a way to keep her legacy alive. Obviously, we know that the good work that we do as individuals helps to keep her legacy alive, but we wanted a way to share her with the world, and that was our goal. We wanted to share who she was with the world. She was a woman of great faith. She was a woman of service. She was a woman who was an advocate for education, and she was also a proponent for leadership. And so those are our core values: education, service, leadership, and faith. And our grandmother, Mrs. Pearline Hill, she embodied all of those virtues and all of those attributes. And so, again, we wanted a way to pay homage to her so that the world could be introduced to this great woman. And so we established the foundation again back in 2013. We've done a couple of things. We've done scholarships. We've done rallies that were centered around bullying. But now here in 2020, we are relaunching our efforts and we are looking for just new and innovative and exciting things to do to help connect her legacy with the world. And this was one of the things that we decided to do because there's so much talk right now as it relates to mental health, right? But more specifically, mental health here in the Black community. One of the things I've always stated was that your mental health is just as important as your physical health. I've said this on numerous occasions. Just as we take the time to train our bodies and to put the proper nutrients into our bodies, exercising and taking supplements, it is critically imperative that we take that same approach to ensure that our mental health is where it should be. And one of the things we want to do in this conversation, we want to break down some of those stigmas, right? We want to break down some of those misnomers. We want to break down some of those maybe convoluted theories as it relates to mental health, more specifically here in the Black community. Sometimes mental health is trivialized in our community. It's reduced, it's downplayed, it's not taken very seriously, right? It's one of those topics that we've often swept under the rug and we've not addressed head on. We've made fun of people who have known mental illnesses, but because of our lack of empathy, sometimes our lack of education and understanding of what mental illness really is and how it impacts countless individuals, not just in the Black community, but in every community, in every ethnicity, right? Across many different socioeconomic platforms, mental illness impacts many people across this world. And so we wanted to specifically deal with mental health in the Black community because, again, it is one of those, as we say, taboo topics that we just don't address enough and don't talk about enough in our individual homes as well as a collective body. And so we wanted to have this conversation tonight. And we didn't want to just have a general dialogue, but we wanted to invite some professionals, some mental health professionals to join us and let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. We have questions that we're going to bring and allow our professionals to answer and provide more insight, more in-depth, giving us maybe a different perspective than what we maybe are used to. So we wanted to invite them tonight. So we have two wonderful, educated mental health professionals joining us tonight. And I want to just take a moment to introduce them both. We are going to allow them the space to walk us through their credentials, because I can't do it justice like they can. But we want to introduce them tonight. First, we want to introduce to you Dr. Jennifer Jeter, who is she is a supervising psychologist within the Shelby County school system. And she also has a private practice, Imani Psychological Services. And so we're glad to have her tonight, glad that she has joined with us. And again, we're going to allow her space in just a moment to tell us a little bit more about herself and a little bit more about her journey. We also have tonight Mrs. Deshel Valley, who is a regional supervisor with Youth Villages. And she's also is a PRN mental health professional with Lakeside Behavioral Health Services. And so again, we're going to allow them some space to introduce themselves to us a little bit more, tell us a little bit more about their mental health journey as professionals, and anything else that they want to tell us before we do a deep dive into our conversation tonight. So again, we're going to start with Dr. Jeter. Just say hello to us tonight, give us a little bit more information about yourself, and then we'll move to Mrs. Valley.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Elder Hill, for that introduction and for inviting me to be a part of this conversation today. Excuse my son, who's I am good. What? Okay, thank you. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I received my Doctor of Psychology degree, Psy.D degree from Nova Southeastern University. So I have been in the field since then, since 97, when I completed my internship here in Memphis. That's how I got to Memphis. And I've been I began my career in community mental health, and then moved on to the school district, but also started my private practice in 2004. So I've been working in private practice, part-time private practice since 2004, as well as with the school district since 2003, initially starting as a school psychologist, and about 3.5 years ago, moved up to a supervising psychologist with the district. I'm glad to be here, and I thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jeter. Mrs. Valley?
Hi there. Well, thank you so much. I'm always excited to be able to talk about the things that matters, and I love the platform. It's formal, but it's also informal. So for me, I am a clinical regional supervisor with Youth Villages, and our organization work with youth and families across the country. For me, I work out of our Mississippi location in Hernando, where I am the regional for Tupelo, Columbus, and Hernando. So I supervise the clinical supervisors. We provide in-home services, therapeutic services, and the belief is that, helping those families and the youth in their natural environment. Right. And so for me, that just speaks volumes of, you can always have structure when you're in a residential setting because there are people 24/7 around. But what do you do when you leave? Most of the time, you retain a lot less of the information. So it's very exciting. I'm very passionate about that, as well as being a mental health therapist with Lakeside Behavioral Health, which is Parkwood. All of those are mental health facilities around the Mid-South. And so working there with the adults, working full-time with the youth. I'm a clinical mental health therapist for the state of Mississippi, a provisional licensed therapist due to the hours. I've only been working there about 5 years now in Mississippi. national certified counselor as well. I also began as the director of counseling at the church that I currently belong. So having the services, getting to know our Christians, as well as dealing with those youth and family there. So I'm just excited for conversation about it. It's about time.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. That's it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to allow our CEO to have some words if she would like to, before we do a deep dive into our conversation. So Raquel, if there's anything that you want to say to the audience tonight before we get into the conversation.
I'm just glad to be here as well. I do know that this is a very important conversation. There's been a lot of talk via social media about mental health. And so I'm excited for this conversation. I'm excited that everyone is having these conversations in whatever form or whatever capacity. I'm just excited that the conversations are happening because it's important, it's relevant, and it's real. I've received text messages, people inboxing like, I'm so glad y'all talking about this. I'm going through this. So this is very, very important. I'm super excited because, you know, we need to be able to have these conversations, you know, and I have a live watch party. So we got some people on Facebook. And so thank you guys for joining and, you know, make sure that we are opening up our ears. And this is a safe environment. Feel free to share what needs to be shared. Yeah. However, if you don't feel comfortable sharing here, you may also inbox or reach out to our professionals as well as the Pearline Hill Foundation. We'll get those credentials up for you in our live feed.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. So let's go directly into it. I've got some prepared questions, but I've got another question I want to ask before we even get into those prepared questions. So obviously, to our panelists, Dr. Jeter and Mrs. Valley, my first question is, why is mental health or mental illness such a difficult conversation in our Black community? Why is it such a difficult conversation, or even to put a different spin on it, why is it such a taboo topic in your professional opinions? We'll start with Dr. Jeter.
I think there's a variety of reasons for that. Partly, it's always been discussed and thought of as a white person's disorder. That's first and foremost. That's one of the issues. But then because of everything that our community has gone through the age of time, we have been taught and told to be strong. So we don't discuss our issues. We hold them in, which is part of the problem, which increases the chances of some of the mental health difficulties that plague our community. But then also a lot of our strength comes from externally. We go to the church. And so we look to prayer, we look to the pastor. There's absolutely nothing wrong with at all with prayer. Prayer is always in order. But we tend to look to the church, look to external sources instead of really dealing with the issues head on. And so those two things are big factors. And then there's a lot of secretive, we're secretive about it. We keep things in the back room. We have that family member that we've kept in the back room that everybody knows about, but nobody wants to talk about. So there's a lot of those things because we want to put on the air that we're strong and that it's not a reflection of the family as a whole, that there's something going on.
Right.
Wow. Thank you. That's good stuff. Mrs. Valley?
And just to piggyback off of that, all of those are really some of the main things that we deal with when it comes to that. The privacy, what we want to project, what we want to display. Nobody, and the biggest thing that I can think of is knowledge of. The word of God talks about what does it say? Lack of knowledge.
Right.
Okay. So understanding that no one has and there are other factors in there with economics, starting with that, not even knowing what the resources are. So, but we don't know what this is. This is not for us. This is what they do. And you mentioned that. And so with that in mind, we perish for lack of knowledge. So that's one of the biggest ones that it is.
Absolutely.
No one wants to take the time, between raising kids, trying to find jobs, having relationships, trying to maintain your health. Mental health gets left behind.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for that. We had a comment on Facebook, and I think this is really a good segue into this particular comment. It says, they mentioned how, let's start with what goes on in my house stays in my house. And so
Yes.
I want to ask this question: how problematic is that whole notion or that theory or that mantra that what goes on in my home stays in my home? Especially if it's something that's toxic, right? Like
Yes.
that we want to hide. We don't want anybody to know about, right? We don't want to disclose that information. So in your professional opinions, how problematic is that, Dr. Valley?
It's extremely problematic, and we deal with a lot with families, with youth who have a mental health diagnosis. And so in part of that treatment, we're treating the individual, but we also treat the family as well. And so when we get our African-American families, we have a lot more engagement to do, a lot more building the rapport to do because of that, especially with our guardians who are elderly or, senior. Because that is it. Sometimes it may come as a court order that the youth becomes a part of the program. And we spend at least 30 to 60 days trying to provide psychoeducation on mental illness, trying to build that relationship. Because of that reason, that would allow us in to even begin to start the treatment. So when I see it on that end, it is extremely problematic in that sense, because it's tradition. It's what you've been taught, and you usually fall back on what you know.
Sure. That's true. Dr. Jeter?
I agree wholeheartedly with what you said. It's extremely problematic. It is a part, it goes back to what we said initially about it being taboo, that we don't discuss things. But here's the other issue. If you think about what happens in the home, then whether it's abuse, whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, these things aren't known because they're not discussed and they're not talked about. So then they don't get the assistance that they need for a child to even be safe, or for a person to be safe, even if it's spousal abuse. So that's another issue where it's problematic, because then we have that increases the trauma that not just a child is whether they're witnessing it or that it's happening to them, but the family as a whole. There's trauma, which adds to the impact on mental health, because now we've got additional difficulties with ACEs, which is, the adverse childhood experiences that were now being talked about and go on throughout life. So it's extremely problematic. And we also look at situations like what we're dealing with now with a lot of emotions within the African-American community, with the protests with George Floyd, but that you're seeing people that usually would hold it together, as we would say, usually who are having difficulties because we've been holding on to these emotional issues for so long.
Absolutely.
Now they're on surface. We've never talked about them. We've never addressed them. We've been holding it all in within the house, or even just within ourselves, not even just within the house, but within ourselves. And now it's boiling over. So now we've got things on top of each other, building on top of each other, and now it's come to a head. And that happens with mental issues too. We're holding on to so much. We're keeping things in the house. Nothing's being discussed. And then it comes to a head because something happens. There's a psychotic break. There's behavior issues. There's something happening in the community where somebody acts out and somebody gets hurt. And then we're in a whole nother, then we're in a legal issue, which is also what keeps people quiet.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
I think something that we have to realize in the Black community too is that it's okay to not be okay.
Absolutely.
It's okay to not be strong. You know, one of the questions that came up says, how do we make checking on your strong friend more than just a Facebook post? Because the reality is we shouldn't just be checking on our strong friends. We need to check on the weak friends too. We should just be checking on people, period.
That's what I was about to say. We just need to be checking on each other.
We just need to check on people, period. You know?
And I think now you also have to keep in mind that we have a world now that is become just, loose with this pandemic, and people emotions are all over the place, and nobody's ever been taught how to regulate their emotions. So you have all of this, with the, not just the peaceful protest, but with everything else that's going on. So those persons with mental health, like you were saying, Dr. Jeter, those that were able to hold it together are not holding together. So those who are dealing with, mental illness concerns are like, wait a minute, that's not, so it's just kind of out there. So it is a very good thing that even in the midst of something so horrific, that at least conversations and hopefully actions will follow, with regard to the mental health talk.
Yeah. Sure. I just want to follow up on something real quick. When she's talking about regulating our emotions, but we're looking at a lot of times our coping skills, and everybody has them, but sometimes what we have always done doesn't work in some situations, and so we have to learn new coping skills, and that's what we get from talking to one another. Whether it is talking to a friend, and they say, "What did you do? What helped you with situations like this?" But in a counseling session and therapy session, we can learn new coping skills to add to your. I in my sessions I call it a grab bag. You have something that you grab onto, but then I may give you some other strategies that you can add to your arsenal of things that you may use that you can use throughout. So we're talking about coping skills, and that's what we're seeing now is that coping skills that used to work are not working anymore. So and now with the added pressure of COVID, the added pressure of the protest, some mental health issues that might not have come out for 10 years are coming out now.
Wow.
That's right.
Because of the added stress. So these are things, this is why it's important for us to have this conversation, but also to, as Raquel was saying, not be afraid to say, I'm not okay. This isn't, I'm not feeling good. This is hard. I'm having a tough day. Even in some, you might say, okay, how were you during the George Floyd, when it first was being discussed? And I know I was telling people, I'm not okay. I'm not okay.
That's right.
Everything coming up is bringing up my own experiences with this. And so I had to deal with myself. I had to say, I'm exhausted this weekend because I've been thinking and feeling. And we have to be honest first with ourselves, which is hard for us to do. Regardless of race, regardless of gender, it's hard for us to be honest with ourselves.
Absolutely.
And we have to be honest with ourselves and say, I'm feeling I'm feeling some kind of way. And but that's okay. It's okay to feel some kind of way. It's okay for you to deal with you. You don't have to apologize, or you don't have to explain it to anybody else. I have to deal with me and where I am right now, and then be able to say, okay, I need to talk to somebody about where I am.
That's right.
And know that that's okay. There's no shame in that, because we all need help. We all need someone to talk to.
That's right.
And that's
I think a lot of times, I'm sorry. I think a lot of times we allow the noise around us to dictate how we take care of self. Because we often allow people and responsibilities to pressure us into not taking care of ourselves, right? Where we're made to look as if we're selfish, right? But what we fail to realize is if I don't take care of me, then I'm not going to be any good to you.
Absolutely.
Right? If I don't ensure that I'm in a good mental place to where I can maybe help you get to a better mental place or mental state, right? That we're both going to be heading in the wrong direction, right? It's that old adage, the blind leading the blind, right?
Absolutely.
I can't see, you can't see, we're both heading to the ditch, right? And so I think we've got to be careful not to allow outside influences and even internal, even the internal battles, right? That we often can have that will cause us to feel guilty about stopping, pausing, and taking care of ourselves.
Absolutely. And I know you want to say something, Ms. Val, but I want to add to what you're saying, the blind lead the blind, but taking care of ourselves. A lot of times we have to remind ourselves when you get on an airplane, they tell you to put a mask on yourself before you can help somebody, help somebody else, even if it's your child. Because if you can't breathe, you can't help somebody else breathe. And we have to think about our mental health the same way. If I'm not okay, if I don't recognize where I am, I can't expect anybody else to understand where I am or be able to help anybody else.
Absolutely.
And I was just simply going to say that when we talk about the strong or just asking for help, and I just think about the population that I currently deal with, it has to do with environment as well. And I think you took it out of, you were saying it, Elder Hill, that, trying to mask what's going on with you from yourself is in and of itself a problem. And we do have to think about environment. Who is in our circle can I turn to? And a lot of times for those people, it's not anyone, because those people in their circle think the same way that they do. And so I was going to say that it is so important on platforms like this that I'm hoping that it reach those persons who is not okay, that don't have that person that's going to be like, oh, well, you can talk to me. Most people in our community do not have that unless it's in a platform like this, because this is easy. I can get my own social media and I can look on my phone without my auntie or my cousin or somebody else listening or knowing. So it is very important. And again, I want to thank you, and I hope some of them are listening, to say, hey, somebody hit on something that I wanted to ask and I don't have anyone.
Absolutely. Raquel and I were talking earlier in the week, maybe last week or sometime, and we just talked about the miseducation as it relates to mental health in our community. We were calling growing up, and you would hear people talk about individuals getting crazy checks. And that, I mean, come on, how absurd is that, right? But you grew up hearing that kind of stuff. That person gets a crazy check. But later, and I was fortunate enough to work for the Social Security Administration, and I later was informed that these are SSI checks or disability checks, right? They're not crazy checks, but it's that type of trivialization of this issue that causes us not to have the empathy, right, with others that we should have. We also remember in school, our resource class was called CDC. Now I don't exactly know what that stands for, but as children, we took it to stand for crazy dumb children.
We didn't know no better.
Again, just ignorant. Absolutely, just absolutely ignorant. But we didn't have the understanding or the knowledge to be able to verbalize that this individual has a mental illness, right? And it may not necessarily, you may not be able to actually see it, right? Just because they don't, maybe their face is not slurred, or maybe they don't have a certain feature that would cause you to deduce they have a mental illness. But they may look normal, just like you and I, right?
Absolutely.
So, but again, it's that again miseducation and lack of understanding, lack of awareness.
Yes.
Just because it wasn't talked about. So
Right.
I want to go into this question that we have. This is as it relates to depression. You know, there's a lot of talk about depression. There's a lot of talk about just feelings of sadness. But we want to kind of get an understanding of what is a clinical diagnosis of depression based on. How does mental health professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, how do they diagnose clinical depression?
I can go first, unless you want to, Ms. Valley, but there are several things that we're going to look for. And when people think of depression, we think of sadness. And so we are going to look for frequency of crying spells, and sadness, but everyone doesn't present the same. And that's one of the things that we have to remember, is that you may have a person who never has a crying spell, but they may have lost some interest in activities. They may have a change in sleep patterns. They may have a change in appetite. They may withdraw. They may have difficulties with concentration. In children and adolescents, you may see increased irritability and never really see a sad mood. So there are a variety of things, and everyone's not going to present the same. And some people may be numb. And so they're going to say, I don't feel anything. I'm feeling kind of numb. And that's going to be, okay, how long has that been going on? And it gets them to describe that more. But if you, one of the other things, and one of that you're going to look for in clinical depression is if they do have describe themselves as sad, if that's sadness or is going on for 2 weeks or longer than 2 weeks, and how frequently does that happen? So we're looking for several different things and several things together. So it's not just one thing. It's going to be, if we're looking at our diagnostic book, the DSM, then we're going to be looking for 5 or 6 of those symptoms from a list. But again, everybody's not going to present the same. So we're going to be looking at, is there a change from your normal presentation too? So
yeah, and just to piggyback off that, all those things are involved when you're talking about a clinical diagnosis with presenting factors. You're going to look at culture. As Dr. Jeter mentioned, everybody does not meet. There are some cultures that may not communicate, may have different facials, may have different things that they do that where another culture would consider that sad or withdrawn or different things like that, and another one would. So that plays into it. Also, when sadness, you grieving, you're sad. So it's going to depend on your presenting factors as well. It's going to depend on the intensity, like she said, or the frequency that is happening. And then a big thing, another that is environment. It's going to depend on as well your functionality, your ability to function, whether it was going to work, relationship, different things across the board. So all of those things are involved in making a clinical diagnosis of depression.
And in the Facebook group, someone said an extended period of time with feelings of loneliness and isolation. And then another person said that they had no idea that I was depressed. I walked into the doctor's office, and just from having a short conversation with me, my doctor asked me, what are you going to do about this depression?
Yeah, because that goes back to the cultural thing. Some of us handle things differently, or we may be perceived as being strong, or the ability to process information differently. And so it's going to present different in different people. So that's why, it takes a culmination of things in order to get the diagnosis.
So let me ask this question. And, you hear a lot of people sometimes, some are more private with their battles. But you also have some people who are vocal and they say, you know, I'm depressed or I feel depressed. In your experience, are those individuals truly depressed, or is it just maybe a short stint with sadness or some feeling of uneasiness? So I guess let me ask it a different way. Individuals who are truly clinically depressed, do they go around saying I'm depressed?
Well, some who've come to terms with their diagnosis, and they may want to be vocal in helping others. And then there are some that, you know, ignorance is still a thing. People misuse it. You know, we do have what we call seasonal blues, like the seasons of the year. You know, you may seem a little sadder, or, you know, a little quieter, a little distant, a little withdrawn. May not necessarily be depression, because you're going to look at the presenting factors. And remember, we talked about grief. You don't necessarily call them depressed because they're grieving and they're sad. So sometimes, you know, that's a 50-50. It just depends on the knowledge and understanding of the person. So sometimes there are phases, like now, you know, everything becomes mental health, you know, maybe not. So there's no different from people picking up the term of the year or the, you know, the word of the day, I'm depressed, when it could simply be, I'm just feeling a little blue or a little sad right now. So there's a difference in the clinical depression and someone just like, you know, I'm sad or I'm grieving, different things like that. So it's just going to depend on the person. But right now, even if they use it loosely, maybe if they're saying it enough, somebody hear it and want to know more about it. So I'll take that.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So let me ask you this question. So what does it mean to have a mental illness? I think, again, there's still a lack of understanding of what it really means to have a mental illness. And I think a lot of people associate mental illness with maybe mental retardation, if that makes sense. So what does it really mean to have a mental illness?
Well, there's several different diagnoses that can be considered mental illness. One of the things that people, and mental retardation is not a mental illness. That is a cognitive disability. So that's about learning, and that has nothing to do with your emotions, or it can impact behavior, but it doesn't. It's a cognitive disorder. Now, we're talking about mental illness, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. There's a range of diagnoses, and with schizophrenia being the most severe. So we're talking about how does it impact your day-to-day functioning?
Right.
That's it.
That we're looking, because just like Ms. Valley said, that everybody feels blue, everybody feels down every once in a while. But that's why I was saying that we're looking at a consistent presentation of these symptoms over a period of time to say, okay, now we're looking at something different other than a situational disorder. When that situation clears up, that you're feeling better. So we're looking at that. But so we're looking at the significance and the impact and the intensity of symptoms, the frequency of symptoms that moves you from, I'm nervous about giving this presentation today, into I've got a social phobia because every time I think about going out in public, then I get this panic. Now, so we're looking. So there's a range, and there's a range with why people come into therapy. Some people come just to bounce things off of somebody. Say, I'm dealing with this life change, or I just want to be able to know myself better and be able to make better decisions, down to having significant mental illness like schizophrenia. So there's a wide range of things, but when we're really looking at an illness or a disorder, we're looking at the quality of those symptoms.
Yeah, and basically, conditions, like she said, that just affect your mood, your thinking, and your behaviors, and your functionality. That's pretty much it summed up.
So you mentioned two different diagnoses that I think we hear a lot about, that there still may be some lack of education around in our community. So, and again, it's trivialized. So when we hear the word bipolar and we hear schizophrenia, what is that exactly? So let's start with bipolar. What does that look like to be bipolar, or to have a diagnosis, a clinical diagnosis of being bipolar? What does that look like?
Bipolar disorder is going to be a mood disorder, and it's going to be having symptoms of depression, to where you may have very low lows, but then also having extreme highs to where you're manic. So it used to be called manic depressive for that reason, but they've changed the name of it. So that's what we're looking. But then there may be some who their lows might not be super low, and their highs may not be super high. So but they still have these mood swings, and but there's still symptoms that you're going to see that will tell you, okay, this person we're looking at. So you may find somebody that during a manic phase, they're gambling, they're sexually promiscuous, they're talking a mile a minute, they don't sleep, they're angering and fighting and getting, but then they get to these very low lows and they can't get out of the bed. So there's those major shifts in mood and in behavior that you see with bipolar.
Okay, all right. What about schizophrenia? I mean, how can we recognize that?
A lot
I
of
can
that
take that one too, but you want?
Okay,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So schizophrenia has to do with their different, what I want to say, there are different sequences, I guess I could use that word, when it comes to determining the levels of schizophrenia or the types of schizophrenia, having to do with paranoia, one of the bigger ones with that. And so with schizophrenia, you having, some could be stemming from the chemical imbalance, but you're also having that which puts you into out of reality. Some is out of reality, and then and for lack of a better way of putting it, coming back in, so to speak, to themselves, or realizing and recognizing that it's themselves. But it's that constant battle that they have within themselves that creates that form of mental illness with schizophrenia.
One of the things that people recognize and understand about schizophrenia is delusions and hallucinations. So that's what you may see, whether they're hearing voices, seeing things. They may talk about feeling something crawling on them or smells. So they've got those psychotic features. Delusions. They may think that they are somebody extremely important, or know somebody extremely important, or things like. So we're looking at hallucinations, delusions. So when she's talking about outside of reality, that's the kind of thing that you will see, and and that's what makes that one of the more significant diagnoses, because of those severe symptoms, and then how they behave and how they think and how they're communicating with other people and how they're able to function is severely impacted.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So we're getting into the last 15 minutes or so of our conversation. Let's kind of go into therapy, right? Counseling. As we say, seeing somebody, right? Going to talk to somebody, right? Going to lay on somebody's couch, right? In our Black community, that's we have not always done a really good job with accepting that whole premise of going to therapy, going to counseling. We've always resorted, many of us have always resorted to faith. right? I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna pray through it. I'm gonna go on a fast, and I'm gonna hear what the Lord has to say about it. And I think all of those things are wonderful. I mean, I'm a man of faith, so I believe in that. But I also believe in therapy. I believe in counseling. So I want to talk about some of those barriers that we may have in our community that maybe impede our willingness to go to therapy or counseling. I do know one that I've noticed is lack of representation. Not necessarily having what we would say a trusted individual who can relate to my experience as an African American, right? That if I go to an older white man, he's not going to be able to relate to my experience as a Black male in America, right? And how those factors impede maybe my mental state as well. So let's talk about that for a moment. Let's talk about the importance of therapy, the importance of counseling, and why we need to talk more about this in our community. Dr. Jeter.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually one of the reasons why I went into psychology and where I practice, is because I want to increase the representation, because we still are underrepresented in the field. But that's because I knew how important this was, how important it was for us to address our mental health. And because we're not seen, and a lot of people, I think the bottom line, and the answer to your question is trust. Yes. Because our community, we don't trust a whole lot of people.
You're right.
And just to be honest, we don't trust a lot of medical doctors to go, and so there's that. Trusting other authority figures in any type of career. But so we've got a trust issue that we don't want to let go of that, because they're going to tell me what? They don't know me. They don't know my family. They don't know. So there's that. But then, like you said, to be vulnerable with another culture, with a white male therapist or a white therapist, is going to be another. You have to drop that wall in order to get the assistance that you need, in order to say, I need some help. And that's a big issue for us to release that trust to anyone. But that is one, so like you said, the lack of representation is a part of it. But I think the trust issue is big. And we, like I was mentioning earlier, we go to external sources. We go to the church. We go to and pray about it, and which I agree with you. I'm a woman of faith too, and I always in order. But there are going to be some situations where you've got to watch and pray. You've got to talk to somebody who has that wisdom, who has been trained in these other disorders. To and the Bible even talks about wise counsel, seek wise counsel.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And you also have to know how to find a counselor and to pick one, because you also have, it's a working relationship. It's not just about relinquishing your trust to somebody and everything to that person, because it's a working relationship. You're both working there. I'm not going to work harder than you at your own treatment. So so you have to.
That's exactly right.
So you have to be
Dr. G.
So we have to work together, and that's so right. You've got to have a good relationship with that person. And so sometimes you might not find that in every therapist. You have to say, okay, I don't think this is working, and know that you have to find somebody else. So also finding somebody that you can develop a good working relationship with in order to make the progress that you need to make.
Wow. Yeah. You made me think of young LaVan Zandt when she said, I'm not going to fight you for your healing, beloved.
It's true. She's speaking because you will get into sessions, and Ms. Valley will tell you get into sessions and they just want to sit there and you tell them exactly what they need to do. And,
right.
And I'm like, wait a minute. Yes, sir. Who is that? Yes.
Come on, teach the people, Jordan.
Come on, baby.
But and I have some I'm working with right now. It's like, so I need to do. okay, what do you need to do? What have we been talking about? How do you need to
Yes.
help yourself reach this
Yeah.
goal?
That's right.
Because when I tell them,
Absolutely.
when I'm talking to my clients the very first day, especially with the kids that I see, and I see kids and adults, I will say to them, okay, and I put it in a sports analogy because most people understand that.
Right.
I said, and I'll ask, I said, do you like sports? And what's your favorite sport? Basketball, football, whatever. I said, okay, now that's a team sport. And so as a team, the quarterback can't win the game by themselves.
Exactly.
Michael Jordan, as great as he was, can't win the basketball game by himself. So we are working together in this. So we are a team. And if I'm working with kids, your parents are part of the process. You and I are going to be working one-on-one, but all of us care about you, and we're working together to get you from where you are now to where you need to be. So that's the kind of relationship you have to have, is thinking about it as a team effort to work through that, to build the goals together, and also build, take the steps to reach those goals together. And so when you're talking about what are those barriers, being able to develop that trust and know that we're working together. I'm not going to, do this more than you. I'm not going to tell you what to do. We're going to develop to work on that together. Then people sometimes, okay, I don't have to just sit here and you tell me about myself. Yeah, there's some things I may have to help you, learn about yourself. That's why you're here. So, but you're going to ultimately do the work.
That's right. That's right.
And I think
Ms.
another,
Valley, go ahead.
Yeah, another thing about reaching out, is fear of the unknown. They have no idea what that is going to be like. And then when you're talking about environment, you're talking about, who am I going to even be able to ask about going to therapy, or what a counseling session consists of. Some of the things that I have found, and I usually have a 3-session minimum for them to get in line with their own treatment and process. Because most of the times we give assignments and different things for them to work on. By therapy session 3, if you have not worked on any assignments, you've not brought any information, then you're not invested in your own treatment. And, we want you to be successful. And like Dr. Jeter said, working as a team. But what they need to know with coming into a session, that this is about you. If you're not ready, and I love my couples, because usually one side of that couple don't necessarily want to be there. And then you have one that do. And so off the bat, I'm like, why are you here? And you can usually tell the difference, because we know that the change has to come from within you.
Yes.
We're there to kind of call a few plays, give a few suggestions, different interventions, different things like that as we see. But you have to come with knowing, I am ready to work on me. I want my actions to be different. I want my behaviors to be different. But that requires you being, number one, truthful, and you being willing to work. And I think that is a huge barrier, because most people don't want to work on themselves. They want you to get it right.
Absolutely. That's good stuff. So I have another question. I know you both work with adolescents. So let's talk about that for a brief moment, how important it is for children to have an atmosphere or an environment that's conducive for them to express themselves, right? To talk about their feelings, to talk about what's bothering them, right? How do we help to create that environment? So our children will feel comfortable, maybe it's talking to, right, a professional such as yourselves, right? So let's talk about that, how important that is, children in therapy or counseling.
I think it's very important. We deal a lot, like I said, with families working in home. And a lot of times we have the parents that are there, they've opted to come into the program, but they feel like it's for the child and that they don't have to participate. But how many of you know, if I'm still in that environment, and I work on me as a child, but the person that's in charge of me, my parent or my guardian, has no idea the things that I'm dealing with, or even the skill set to help me process through things. I'm just going in a circle. You're going in a circle. So it's kind of like, that's why it's kind of twofold. Certainly with kids, and then making sure that the parent or guardian are aligned with the program, because it's extremely hard. The kid is still a child, and even though they're learning, as Dr. Jeter said, their coping skills, they're learning how to de-escalate themselves. We deal with a lot of that, what we call conventional wisdom, of the old school. They don't need to talk, they just need this, or they just need that. And, the child is coming to therapy, they're receiving, they're getting, understanding, they're gaining knowledge about themselves along the way. But then you get into that roadblock of that parent that's like, that's just for them. I don't have those problems. And you can imagine the barriers or that happens for that child.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, when you're thinking about because if we're talking about depression, or you're talking about anxiety, or some parents might not have that experience of themselves, though a lot of times with both those disorders there's a genetic factor. But if a parent doesn't understand what the child is feeling, and doesn't truly listen or know how to listen to a child, then they're going to miss it, and then overlook or dismiss what a child is trying to say when they're describing how they're feeling, or when they're saying, they may see that they're not eating. They may say, okay, they were up walking around all night, but then not really pay attention to other things when they're talking about being sad, or when they are irritable. They just may think that they're just mad or just misbehaving. And those are all signs of different disorders, not just ADHD, but even a child misbehaving may be a sign of something else. And ADHD and anxiety mimic each other a lot. And so a child that may be very active might not be ADHD. They may be anxious. And that is something that happens in our community
a lot.
And so a lot because of community and of what they're experiencing, that they're anxious. And so we have to listen. And sometimes that's a big lesson that I spend a lot of time in a lot of my sessions, is the difference between hearing and listening. And so parents truly knowing how to listen and be willing to listen to what their children are saying and describing, so that they can really get the help that they need. And you get a lot of pushback from especially teenagers about coming in. But when they realize that you're there to really and truly listen to them, it's pretty quick that they fall in line. And they're like, oh, okay, you're really listening to what I have to say. You're understanding me. And then also when a lot of times they think that you're going to take sides with their parents, when their parents just come in and say, oh, they're being bad and they're doing, and it's like, okay, well, there's another side to the story. What's really going on? And then we can have a dialogue, and they are willing to come and willing to work. So there's a lot of different factors, but I agree with what's been said already.
Absolutely. Well, as we work to wrap this up, I do want to get your thoughts around this last point. As we continue to talk about mental health and mental illness within our community, how do we continue efforts like this, so that we can continue to educate the masses, and again break down that barrier that people often are faced with when it comes to, should I go and talk to someone, or should I just keep it to myself? How do we continue, again, conversations and efforts like this, so that we can continue to educate and bring clarity to, again, what has been often thought of as a taboo topic?
I think continuing to do things like this is one place to start. And I know because of not only the pandemic, but also because of the George Floyd situation, that there are more and more of these types of forums happening, which is wonderful. But the other thing is finding somebody that you trust to be able to say, okay, look, this is what I'm feeling, and starting there. Talk to if you have a primary care physician that you know, that you trust, or that you've been working with, that may be a place to start as well. And they can help to understand what you're, as Raquel was saying, somebody talking about saying that they went and talked to their doctor, and the doctor was able to say, okay, so what are you going to do about this depression? It may be starting there, but finding somebody that you do trust, but also just being real. First and foremost, you got to be true to yourself. You really and truly have to start being honest with ourselves and saying, I just don't feel right. I'm not okay.
And you know, the thing about it is that as parents, it's so important. Like you just said, you have to be honest with yourself, because you cannot help your children if you're not aware of what you're dealing with, and if you're giving them advice or giving them vibes based off some mental illness that you are dealing with. And you know, and so it's very important. It's so important, like you just said, you have to be able to say, I'm not okay, I need help, and get yourself together, because our children are at stake. Because they don't actually.
I'm going to add this one thing, because I know Ms. Val, but I also would say, and I do say, that asking for help or saying I'm not okay is not a sign of weakness. That is a sign of strength. That is a sign of strength, to be able to say, to take the mask off. I know you were talking about masks earlier, and I do a whole session on wearing a mask. But and I do a whole session for real on wearing masks. But taking the mask off yourself and being able to say, I need help, I'm not okay, is strength. When you're able to say, I need to go and help me, that's not weakness. It is okay. And that's what is important to me is for people to know, is that taking care of yourself is a sign of strength. It's not weakness at all.
And that was one of my biggest things. I really believe in each one teach one. You can start where you are. If that's a friend or relative or whatnot, allow them to talk with you. One of the free resources that I'm aware of across the country is the organization called National Alliance for Mental Illness. And they offer free classes for consumers, for children, for adults, for caregivers of them, free classes just across. And now they've gone to Zoom. So that is a safe place where you could just gather information. And in that, they talk a lot about just finding the resources in your own community. The doctor, you know, those churches that have counseling centers, friends, like you said, the person you trust. But NAMI is a great organization that I am a part of that is phenomenal when it comes to providing resources, directing people, safe information, protecting your information. If you don't trust, you know, call them, because everybody there either is a consumer or they are a caregiver of a consumer.
That's good information. As we work to close, I was just sitting there thinking, I think for many of us in our community, we're afraid of diagnosis. I think we're afraid to hear you have this, or you have symptoms that look like this. You think about it even in our physical health, right? We don't want to hear that we have hypertension. We don't want to hear that we're borderline diabetic. You know, we don't want to hear things like that. It scares us, right? And so I think it makes us more apprehensive to go and get things checked out. But I think that's also very similar to our mental health, right? That we don't want to hear that you may be borderline bipolar, or you may have all the classic symptoms of bipolarism. So I think that's what we've got to be, we got to break down as well, that it's better to know, right? It's better to know and then work toward treatment, or that process to healing, to manage whatever it is, right? I think so. Speak to that real quick as we work to close. The importance of getting the diagnosis, so we know, where we stand and what's going on with us.
I think, as you mentioned, there's a lot of things that it's scary. And when you don't feel right, you want to know, but you don't want to know. You don't want to. But when you think about it, there are some diagnoses that are not curable. Schizophrenia, you're not going to have a cure, but they can be treated, and you can live a fulfilled life. Yes, depression and anxiety are treatable. They're some of the most treatable mental disorders that there are. So you can get treatment, and depending on what the issue is, sometimes with a combination of therapy and medication, you can get to a point where it has been, you can't be in remission or be I'm not gonna say cured, but you have to do something in order to address it, in order to be able to live the life that you want to. That's why earlier I said to go from where you are now to where you want to be, so that you can find out what works best for you. And if you don't ever know, you'll never know and connect with somebody that's going to help you treat those symptoms that you have, whether it's with medication and therapy or therapy alone. There are various ways that you can address it, but you have to know. Just like, with diabetes or hypertension, if you don't know, it's not treated, and then they get worse. And the same thing happens with mental illness. And here's the other thing: mental illness is going to affect you physically as well as mentally. So we've got to, they go hand in hand. They go hand in hand. And so we have to address ourselves in totality, not just in pieces.
Absolutely. Anything else to add to that, Dr. Valley, before we
just that it has to do with will. Some people are comfortable, in their illness. They're comfortable with not knowing, and that's always going to be a barrier. Mm-hmm. So the resources, the help is out there. Like we always say, kids may have the will, but not the skill. Adults may have the will, but not the skill. And that's a major part. If they're wanting the help, it's out there. But all of us can be a part of getting this word out, just like today.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank each of you for joining us tonight for this very critical conversation, mental health in the Black community. We want to thank our mental health professionals, Dr. Jennifer Jeter, Mrs. Deshel Valley, for just lending your time, your expertise, giving us great, invaluable information as relates to mental health and mental illness. I would urge each of you who are listening, who will watch this, reach out to these two individuals. If you're in the Memphis metropolitan area, feel free to reach out to them. Again, Dr. Jennifer has a private practice where she sees patients. And so feel free to reach out to her. Mrs. Valley, mental health counselor, she sees individuals as well. And so again, reach out to these two. If get with your PCP as it was recommended, and find you a good resource and take care of your mental health. As I forestated, your mental health is just as important as your physical health. And as Dr. Jennifer Jeter mentioned, your mental health plays a huge factor into your physical health. And so we just need to take care of ourselves, right? Take care of ourselves, do what's necessary. I know the process can be scary at times, but we need to go through that process, go through that journey to healing, right? Let's get to a better place. And we got to have more conversations like this. This won't be the last conversation we have. Obviously, we didn't even scratch the surface of things that we could talk about. Right. But again, I just want to thank each of you. Again, Dr. Jennifer, Mrs. Deshel, thank you so much for your expertise and lending your time to us tonight for this very critical conversation. Before we close, is there anything else either of you would like to say before we close? To the listening audience.
Well, thank you for having this. Thank you for putting this together and realizing how important this conversation and this topic is for our community. And I just want to commend you for putting it together, but I thank you for it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. And I hope you do decide to do this again, because it's very much needed.
And I'm sorry, y'all, my phone keeps going, my connection keep going in and out. So I know I'm on here now, so I want to say this. We do have people in the comments asking for a part 2. So I don't know, Darian, maybe we can try.
Yeah, I haven't been able to watch the comments because of trying to moderate. So yeah, we will definitely do a part 2 at some point because we do need to go a little bit deeper into some of the conversation as relates to mental health in the Black
and
community.
also it was suggested more men need to watch. So let's rally up some men, because they need help too. It's not just the women, the men need help too, especially in our Black community, because a strong man, a whole man, let me not say strong, but a whole man leads a whole family. You understand? And a whole mom leads whole children. And so it's very important that we all get all the help that we need. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Darian and I will put together a resource list and post it on the foundation page, where we will list the resources that were talked about tonight, as well as our 2 professionals, their information. So if you guys need that, we'll definitely put that list together for you and post it to our page so that we can be sure, because the purpose is to help. We just want people to help, and we want to educate. We want to educate because we are having these conversations in our Black community more, but we want to make sure we're having these conversations from the right perspective.
Absolutely.
And so that we can be effective, in our community, because that's very important. So I appreciate everyone, all the people live. We're getting a lot of comments, so it's been real good dialogue, even in the comments. So this has been great.
Good.
Excellent news.
Awesome. Great job.
Thank each of you so much. We certainly appreciate you. We ask that you would like this, share it. Let's get more individuals involved in actually watching this conversation. Again, and stay tuned. We will come back with more. We ask you would visit the Pearline Hill Foundation's page on Facebook. Like us on Facebook, like us on Instagram. We're also on Twitter under the Pearline Hill Foundation. And look for more to come from our foundation. We are truly seeking to educate and provide service specifically to our Black community. Again, have a wonderful night. Thank you all. Be blessed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.